brief presentation of how to explain the Temple of the Vedic Planetarium to the educated public who are going to think that this is just some Hindu mythology. In other words, this, what you see here on the screen, has to be explained in such a way that people say, wow, that's far out. If we do it right, they will be very impressed. We will make a strong statement in the world. If we do it wrong, we're going to look foolish. Very foolish. So it's very important that we're able to explain what you see here. Because no one in any educational system, if they look at that, they can't understand it at all. Are we all on the same page on that? Okay, now how did I get into this project? It all happened when I came across this letter from Srila Prabhupada to Rameshwar on April 2nd, 1977. That's when the letter was written. I came across this in 2011. My dear Rameshwar, please accept my blessings. Now we are forming a scientists' party, and we shall try, with their help, to establish Krishna consciousness as the genuine scientific movement of the world, exposing the so-called scientists as nothing but speculators. In other words, Prabhupada wants us to expose and to smash these atheistic presentations of the cosmos, of creation, of evolution, all these things. Now he continues in the next paragraph. Swarup Damodar has received very good response here in India from the scientific community, and there is good hope that many others will join him. He is returning to America for preparing some publications. That first publication was Life Comes from Life. So this was already beginning to smash the materialistic conception that life came from matter. So that first book, Life Came from Life, Life Comes from Life, Prabhupada gave him that idea. So he is returning to America for preparing some publications, and when these are completed, I have asked him to tour vigorously throughout the world, lecturing with his other colleagues at all major institutions and universities. He has drawn up a budget of immediate needs, a copy of which is enclosed, and I immediately sanctioned this amount. So in this next paragraph, Prabhupada explains the amount he's prepared to spend. Whatever expenditure he requires, supply him immediately from the BBPT. I am prepared to give $10,000 or more monthly, if required, to finance this most important preaching program. When I first read that, in 1977, Prabhupada was prepared to spend $10,000 a month, that's $120,000 a year, for this science preaching. Translated in today's dollars, that's a huge amount of money. And I thought, wow, Prabhupada really wants this done. This is serious. Now, how serious is it? He says in the next paragraph, you can save this money by minimizing the expenditure in the luxury departments of Sanskrit and artists. So the Sanskrit department and the artist department were the luxury departments, and they were going to be sacrificed for the scientific preaching. We do not want these departments for the time being. He's going to, forget Sanskrit and art department for the time being. As he said earlier, his most important project now is the science preaching. One or two men must suffice for Sanskrit work, and there's no need of new paintings. Whatever paintings we have, that is enough. There's no need of constantly making new variations of the same themes. So for the art department, no more expenditure. If they want to continue painting, let them come and live here in Bombay or in any of our other temples in India. We have got sufficient facilities now for accommodation, and this way we can save so much money. So I read that letter, and I was thinking, Prabhupada really now is focusing his whole energy on the science program to expose what he called so-called scientists as nothing but mental speculators. So I read that, and I was like, wow. Then I was on my way to London for a preaching program. So at the London Soho Street Temple, they gave me a room where generally the sannyasis stay, the visiting guests. And in that room, there was a table with a small little library of books. You know, so being curious, I started looking at the titles, and one title leaped out at me. It was called The Goldilocks Enigma. The Goldilocks Enigma. What in the world is this? So I pulled it out. Written by Dr. Paul Davies, one of the top physicists in England. And as I browsed through the book, it was about the discovery that all of the laws of nature are so finely tuned that if they were adjusted in the most finite way, then life as we know it would never have arisen. So it looks as if our universe has been designed for life. It looks that way at face value. And so he wrote a whole book about this. And so now we're going to discuss how the scientists try to come up with another idea. Oh, by the way, this is called the anthropic principle, that it appears that all the laws of nature in the entire universe are exactly in the right, the constants are exactly in the right proportions to allow life to exist. So that's how I got started. So when I saw that book, I got that book, and I started reading it. And it reminded me of when I saw the Cosmos series with Dr. Carl Sagan in the 1980s. This is what Dr. Carl Sagan, in one segment he goes to India. And the camera cuts to shots of agrarian India. And he says, cosmology brings us face to face with the deepest of mysteries, with questions that were once treated only in religion and myth. And then he refers to the Rig Veda. And he says, the most sophisticated ancient cosmological ideas came from Asia, and particularly from India. Amidst the routine of daily life, the harvesting and winnowing of grain, people all over the world have wondered, where did the universe come from? Asking this question is a hallmark of our species. There is a natural tendency to understand the origin of the cosmos in familiar biological terms. So understanding the origin of the cosmos in familiar biological terms means that higher dimensional reality is explained in terms of the three-dimensional reality which we have experience of. Just to give you an example, supposing you were able to go back 10,000, well, let's say 5,000 years in time to Hastinapur, and you drive a Mercedes SUV, and you want to explain to the chariot drivers, hey, you got a nice chariot there. Yeah, I got an SUV, but what's that? Well, it's a kind of car. Well, what's that? Well, it's a chariot. Oh, okay. Well, how fast does it go? It really goes fast. Well, my chariot's really fast. I got 4 of the fastest horses, 4 horsepower. So, well, my SUV has 250 horsepower. And he says, well, 200? How can you get 250 horses in front of a chariot? So, we're trying to explain in the familiar biological terms to people in something that they have no experience. Okay? So this is what the Bhagavatam is trying to do, trying to explain to us in 3-dimensional time and space what is the situation of the universe in higher dimensional space, of which we have no conception of. And then Sagan says, the Big Bang is our modern scientific creation myth. It comes from the same human need to solve the cosmological riddle. Most cultures imagine the world to be only a few hundred human generations. Hardly anyone guessed that the cosmos might be far older, but the ancient Hindus did. And then he said something that I remembered way back in 1980. It always stuck with me. And this is what he said. That Hinduism is the only religion in which the time scales correspond, no doubt by accident, to those of modern scientific cosmology. So the time scales of the Vedas corresponds to modern scientific cosmology, no doubt by accident, he says. So my comment now on this is, excuse me, no doubt by accident. What kind of scientific conclusion is that? The phrase no doubt must mean no doubt in Sagan's mind, but it can't mean no doubt in other people's minds unless he did a statistical survey. Moreover, saying no doubt should mean that data is available to back up this statement. But no doubt by accident actually reveals something much deeper. It reveals a biased mindset on the part of Carl Sagan. Could the ancient timescales correspond to modern cosmological data by sheer accident? It's an implausible and unreasonable conclusion. If they got it right, they got it right. Let them have the credit. Why diminish it by saying it was by accident and there's no doubt about it whatsoever? So this is the situation with modern science. Now, how many people here think that most scientists are honest, well-meaning persons who are just trying to understand what's going on? Does anyone believe that? A few people.
Some do.
Some do. Well, here, let me quote from Professor Paul Davies, an eminent and respected physicist, explains the mindset of modern cosmology and physicists. This is from his book, quote, "Many scientists who are struggling to construct a fully comprehensive theory of the physical universe openly admit that part of their motivation is to finally get rid of God, whom they view as a dangerous and infantile delusion. And not only get rid of God, but any vestige of God talk, such as meaning or purpose or design in nature. These scientists, these are his colleagues, these scientists see religion as so fraudulent and sinister that nothing less than total theological cleansing will do. They concede no middle ground and regard science and religion as two implacably opposed worldviews," end quote. This is the view of the vast majority of scientists in the 21st century as revealed by an insider. So, how many people recall reading that Prabhupada said we should smash the atheistic scientists' conclusions? How many people? How many people recall reading Prabhupada saying we should have a synthesis of science and religion? You recall reading that? Where? I've never ever seen it. Have you seen it? There can never be a synthesis of science and religion from Prabhupada's point of view and from the scientist's point of view. Why? Because Prabhupada wants to expose the so-called scientists who are nothing but speculators. And the scientists concede no middle ground. They regard science and religion as two implacably opposed worldviews. They see religion as fraudulent and sinister, so nothing less than total theological cleansing will do. So what we have to do is present this in a way that people will understand. The educated public who were taught the Big Bang theory of cosmology. How many people were taught the Big Bang theory of cosmology in school? It's still taught in schools and educational systems all over the world, although most physicists don't accept it anymore. But it's still taught because they haven't come up with another theory that's sound. But it is so filled with flaws that they can no longer subscribe to it. Yes?
It was just on Yahoo about, 10 days, 2 weeks ago.
Right.
That it was an Indian scientist who lives in Canada, I think in BC. And he said, actually, he has this thing where the universe is not only expanding, but expands and contracts, which is like a lot.
Well, that's not what he said. He said it was infinite.
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, I think questions and answers should come at the end. But he said it was infinite, and his name was Das. I was wondering if he was maybe a devotee from Alberta, Canada, the university there. So the point is this, that most physicists are trying to come up with a theory that works. And I deal with all the different theories that they're now coming up with in my book. But there's two things that are fundamental that they still don't understand. Number one, gravity. Gravity, which is the most common force known to every living entity. They don't know how it came into being. They don't know what causes it. All they know is the effects. They can calculate the effect, but they don't know where it comes from. They don't know how it actually works. It's a big mystery, and I go through 4 major theories that they have come up with, and I show the flaws of each one. But basically, religious skeptics, these scientists, they challenge, how did God come into being? Who created God? And of course, our traditional understanding is that God is an eternal, supernatural being without beginning or end. So clearly, an eternal being always exists. So that question is irrelevant. That's our answer when they say, well, who created God? God is a higher dimensional, supernatural. You have to use the word supernatural because that word they know. If you say spiritual, then they think that is just crackpot religion. Supernatural, higher dimensional entity without beginning or end. So clearly an eternal being always exists, so the question is irrelevant. And then you can refer to what Bhargava was talking about, that now they think that the universe is also infinite and eternal. So eternality exists. Scientists will agree with that. Before the Big Bang theory, there was the steady state theory, which was popular until the Big Bang took it over, and now nobody even knows about the steady state theory of the universe. The steady state theory of the universe was that the universe was infinite and eternal. Until someone came up with this idea of the Big Bang. For some reason they wanted a beginning. Now they're realizing that a beginning causes major problems to explain it. This is the major problem. How do you explain the beginning of the universe? The Big Bang Theory was that there was a singularity wherein everything, all the energy and matter of the universe was compacted into a size smaller than the atom, and it exploded, and that Big Bang explosion caused our universe. But when you ask where did the singularity come from, you got a problem. How did everything get compacted into the singularity? They have a problem answering that question also. Where was the singularity located? That's another question. And you can also say, what sparked the singularity to explode all of a sudden? It was just sitting there, and then all of a sudden it exploded. So these questions they can't answer, and that's why the Big Bang Theory is no longer embraced by physicists, although it's still taught in schools, because they haven't come up with another theory that's strong enough to replace it.
It's still the conclusion at the Natural Science Museum down on Wilshire too. You go through the whole thing, and in the end they got the Big Bang. It's very disappointing because all the rest of it is very interesting.
Right, so they're stuck on this Big Bang. It's the only theory they have right now. So, now, Stephen Hawking, everybody knows, he's one of the most famous physicists also. So in regards to the laws of the universe, the laws of physics being so finely tuned for life, he remarks, our universe, this is in his latest book, our universe and its laws appear to have a design that both is tailor-made to support us, and if we are to exist, leaves little room for alteration. That is not easily explained, and raises a natural question why it is that way. So, my comment is, it is not easy to conclude the universe was never designed for life. That's the conclusion that he wants to come to. And he says it's not easy to explain, because it appears that it does have a design. So we can see that he already has an a priori idea that there's no God, and it didn't happen that way, and that's the direction he's going. In other words, he's not open and going where the data leads him. So I say that to accept the data at face value, well, it appears that it was designed for life. All the constants and the laws appear to have a design that's both tailor-made to support life, and if we are to exist, leaves little room for alteration. Then we can say that that's strong evidence for design, that there was a conscious design, a conscious living being that put this design or this plan into action. And that's called the anthropic principle. So the scientists now are the physicists are trying to explain why it appears this way when actually that's not the case. They're 100% sure there's no God, there's no consciousness. I said there's two things they can't explain. The first thing is gravity. The second thing is consciousness. They have a standard model of physics where they explain everything about our universe. But there's two things missing in the standard model. Gravity, because they don't understand it, and consciousness, because they don't understand that either. Where does it come from? So, I remark here that the conclusion is inescapable that the universe is completely bio-friendly, which seems to support the traditional story of God creation. But for the modern story, the scientific story, it raises a question. Is random chance a plausible explanation for why the universe is delicately balanced to support life. Is fine-tuning of every law of nature really just one fluke after another fluke after another fluke ad infinitum? Because that's their conclusion. They have to face up to it. If it's all happened by chance, then everything is just one fluke after another fluke ad infinitum. Now, Nobel Prize winner and professor of astronomy at UC Berkeley, Dr. Alexei Filipenko, was recently interviewed on radio. And the question was to explain the origin of the laws of physics. And Dr. Filipenko says, what is the origin of the laws of physics? I don't know. That's a question science can't answer. What if the laws of physics have always existed and they gave rise to a universe, our universe, and perhaps even multiple universes? That is a possibility, but it is a possibility that is sort of outside the realm of science, because we don't know of any way to experimentally or observationally to test whether that is a correct hypothesis. So then the interview says, okay, well, let's start from the beginning. What gave rise to the universe? Why was there a Big Bang? Dr. Filipenko. So, what gave rise to the universe is an interesting question. We don't exactly know the answer to that, but we have some ideas. So I'm challenging in this book that cosmology is not science. Because science means fact. Science means evidence. Science means data. But cosmology is very similar to religion. They have a strong belief, but no data, no evidence to back it up. In other words, it's blind faith without evidence. That is cosmology. What the physicists present in their modern scientific jargon is just their own blind faith that has no evidence or data to support it. And my comment on Dr. Filipenko's ideas, on his comment, we have some ideas. I say, well, ideas are fine, but we want scientific facts. It doesn't bode well for the modern origin story if science only has ideas, but no answers based on valid data. So then on the next chapter, we put Stephen Hawking on the witness stand. The book is called Cosmology on Trial. It's presented as how you would present things in a court of law. You have to present evidence, facts, and you're cross-examined. So we have 5 chapters where we slice and dice Dr. Stephen Hawking. And I begin, we say here that our attorney has arranged for a recent Larry King Live broadcast to be replayed for the jury to watch on day 4. Stephen Hawking is introduced as a professor of mathematics at the University of Cambridge for 30 years, a theoretical physicist, the 2009 recipient of the Presidential Medal of Freedom, and the co-author of The Grand Design with Leonard Blondell. So Hawking is a man with outstanding credentials. So Larry King's first question is, you say that science can explain the universe without the need for a creator. What is that explanation? Why is there something instead of nothing? Here's Stephen Hawking's answer. Gravity and quantum theory cause universes to be created spontaneously out of nothing. That's his answer. Concise and to the point. He states that gravity and quantum theory creates universes. Well, logically, if gravity and quantum theory is the causing agency, then they must have existed before the universe. We all agree on that? So the question is, what is the origin of the universe? universe, and he's saying that something caused the universe, but not God, not a conscious living being, but just gravity and quantum theory. So I question, how did the universe created from nothing? Because gravity and quantum theory is something. But no clue from Hawking. The contradiction is left hanging. And I say that this answer mimics the traditional story that God created the universe spontaneously out of nothing. Gravity and quantum theory have now replaced the supernatural creator of traditional origin stories. But I want to know how gravity and quantum theory existed before time and before space and before the universe. So Larry King also wants to know this. So King doesn't appear to be satisfied with Hawking's answer. He wants to know how gravity and quantum theory came to be. So he tries again, same question from a different perspective. You write, here's his question to Stephen Hawking. You write that because there is a law such as gravity, the universe can and will create itself from nothing. Can you tell me how that law of gravity came into existence? So, Stephen Hawking's answer. Gravity is a consequence of M theory, which is the only possible unified theory. It is like saying y is 2 plus 2 equal to 4. There you have it. You heard the answer directly from Stephen Hawking. Now you know how the law of gravity came into existence. Or do you? He didn't give an answer.
We're just avoiding.
There was no answer. He just simply added a step, saying gravity is a consequence of M theory. But how many people know what M theory is? I'm not buying that the law of gravity is a consequence of M theory. I don't even know what the M theory is. Now, that's why Larry King is asking, now will the uninformed public think that M theory is Hawking's theory? Well, it isn't. Edward Witten is a respected physicist, and he has proposed this idea of M theory. But here's how he downplays his own, he calls it a hypothesis, not even a theory. He says that M theory has been criticized for lacking predictive power or being untestable, which is true. Further work continues to find mathematical constructs that join various surrounding theories. However, the tangible success of M theory can be questioned given its current incompleteness and limited predictive power. So the person who came up with M theory, Dr. Edward Witten, says it has limited predictive power, and I say, well then how is it that Stephen Hawking can predict that the whole universe arose from it? Moreover, I didn't appreciate that Hawking minimized the merit of King's question. It's like saying y is 2 plus 2 equal 4. I mean, I read here that anybody can use the same reasoning as Hawking. The same smug logic will allow the religious extremists to say the universe is a consequence of God. He holds the key to the only possible universe, unified theory. It's like saying y is 2 plus 2 equal to 4. God is what he is, the case closed, end of story. Anybody can use that logic. Doesn't prove anything. There's no data, no evidence, no nothing. It's not even science. All it is philosophy. It's philosophical speculation, which is what Prabhupada called it way back 50 years ago, in the 20th century, way ahead of these guys. So King's next question goes right to the point many of the audience probably want to hear. Larry King. Do you believe in God? Stephen Hawking. God may exist, but science can explain the universe without the need for a creator. So with this response, Hawking reveals a lot more about his belief system than he probably intended. His personal belief is that God didn't create the universe because quantum theory and the law of gravity created the universe. But we need evidence in science, right? That's what makes it science. We need data. No data is presented in this interview. Anyway, we go on, and it's a complete shambles for Stephen Hawking. He can't back up his points at all. It's all just philosophy. But basically, the cosmologists, by the way, the book is called Cosmology of Trial, Cracking the Cosmic Code. They base everything on mathematics. You can't observe whether a Big Bang happened or not. You can't bring a Big Bang into the lab to test it. You can't bring a black hole into the lab to test it. So they verify everything with mathematics on paper. And then they say, they juggle the figures until they come up with a formula that fits. And then they say, this formula, this math equation predicted the Big Bang. Just look at that. This is their word juggling, because they come up with so many mathematical formulas, all of which result in nonsense. But they don't say that it predicted nonsense. They just reject it. When they find something that kind of fits, then they say, here we have it. It predicted the Big Bang. So I quote in chapter 8 many mathematicians about mathematics. How valid is mathematics as evidence or proof? And even physicists, honest physicists, are on the same page as mathematicians. Physicist Herbert Dingle is quite clear that mathematics can substantiate whatever is required. Here's a quote from his book. In the language of mathematics, we can tell lies as well as truths. And within the scope of mathematics itself, there's no possible way of telling one from the other. We can distinguish them only by experience or by reasoning outside the mathematics, applied to the possible relationship between the mathematical solution and its supposed physical correlate. But Karl Popper, another great mathematics and science philosopher, establishes that physics by mathematics does not even correlate to real-world situations. And this is from his book, quote, properly understood, a mathematical hypothesis does not claim that anything exists in nature which corresponds to it. In other words, that mathematical hypothesis erects only a fictitious mathematical world behind that of the world that we actually see, but without the claim that this mathematical hypothesis represents the real world. So he concludes it is to be regarded only as a mathematical hypothesis and not as anything really existing in nature. And other physicists, the reason they've given up the Big Bang hypothesis is because the singularity that exploded to cause the Big Bang doesn't exist in nature. It only exists on paper. These are formulas to the x to the power of infinity divided by infinity. It's nothing that any mathematician or physicist can work with. So, Michael Nieto is a theoretical physicist at Los Alamos National Laboratory in New Mexico. He deals with satellites, rockets, putting them into space. And when he's asked about gravity, he says, we don't know anything. Everything about gravity is mysterious. His colleague, Thomas Bowles, admitted much the same thing. Right now, we don't have a theory of how gravity is created. Now that's very interesting. How many people would have thought that science knows what gravity is? How many people thought that? That they understood gravity? Are you surprised that they haven't got a clue about it? Now, Sir Isaac Newton, he was able to come up with mathematical formulas that it predicted the reaction of how things would react based on gravitational motion. However, that only shows the effects of gravity. But where is gravity located? Is it located in the earth that's pulling things downward? Or is it located somewhere above that's pushing things downward? Isaac Newton himself thought that anybody who thinks that gravity is within matter has no intelligence whatsoever. He never thought that. He thought it was some other higher dimensional force. By the way, Isaac Newton believed, he was religious, he believed in God. This was before the scientific revolution where they threw God out. So, Newtonian physics only can explain the effects of gravity, but can't explain where it comes from, what causes it, how it works. You have no idea. Einstein's science, general relativity, also cannot explain it. For example, he gave the example of a curved space, which means that the universe, it curves in such a way that causes heavy objects like the sun to what's the word? Bend, not bend.
Deform?
It's like weight on a mattress.
Yeah, right. What's the word?
Yeah.
What?
Concave.
Concave.
Concave. Anyway, it's a verb we're looking for.
You take a bowling ball and put it on a mattress.
It goes down.
And it draws.
So he says what causes gravity is that these things follow the curve of the curved space. However, the flaw in that is that space is weightless. And to say that certain bodies like the sun is heavy and causes a curve means there's already some force acting on it. And we know that if you go into space, you're totally weightless. There is no force that's pulling you down or up. There is even no down and no up. So I spend a whole chapter on explaining how Newtonian physics can't explain gravity, and I spend a whole chapter on relativity theory can't explain gravity. Then this chapter, quantum theory. Can that explain gravity? Well, quantum theory postulates a particle, that gravity is contained within a particle called the graviton. This is one of the newer theories. So, at the beginning of this chapter, I say, in our courtroom drama, we have discovered that the science creation story may be on thin ice. The most common occurrence in nature, gravity, has yet to be fully understood. The vast size of the universe creates problems for our knowledge of gravitational force. Because how is it that gravity can extend over the entire universe and hold galaxies billions of light years away so that they revolve according to some pull of gravity? So they had to throw that hypothesis out because it just didn't make sense. So I comment here, science has left many unanswered questions about gravity on the table. How does the force of gravity hold all bodies in the universe in perfect balance so that they float effortlessly in their orbits, even at immense distances? Does quantum theory provide the answer? So, in their attempt to uncover the physical mechanism of gravity, quantum theorists explain gravitational force as a process of interacting particles. Based on this, they have postulated a particle called the graviton, although it has never been detected in experiments. They never detected such a thing. It's just mathematics on paper. It's a hypothesis. And they hypothesize these things. They hypothesize the mass of a graviton. They define it as zero. So the mass of a graviton is defined as zero, and its electric charge is also defined as zero, neither positive nor negative. But it does have spin. They define that it spins. Dr. Paul Davies writes that, quote, all fundamental particles of matter, like the quarks and the leptons, possess spin of 1/2. By contrast, the known exchange particles have spin of just 1. The graviton, if it exists, would have spin 2. If it exists. I mean, they're so blatant about it. What I noticed was that this word "if" is a very pesky word. If you read all of their hypotheses, if you read all of the claims in the scientific magazines and the newspaper articles and on TV, all of the statements begin with "if." That means that's a guess. They don't know. I write here, by admitting if it exists, Davies reveals that gravitons are not real-world particles like electrons, but merely theoretical constructs. Despite the fact that a graviton's existence and properties are only inferred via mathematical theory, physicists still explain that gravitational force operates by the exchange of gravitons. So now they are explaining, if you take physics courses in the university, they'll explain how gravity works by the operation of the exchange of gravitons, which don't really exist. We don't have any proof, we've never detected them. If that isn't risky enough, he has no choice but to admit the following, and here's a quote from his book. Nobody has ever detected a graviton directly because gravity is such a weak force, but its properties can be deduced from what we know about gravitational fields. So no one has ever detected a graviton. Anyway, we go through a whole chapter and it's exposed that quantum theory cannot explain gravity. It's all based on if. It's all based on hypotheses. No data, no evidence. Next, we come to M theory. This is the latest and what they call the greatest. This is what Stephen Hawking said. The universe was created spontaneously from nothing by gravity and M theory. Well, let's look at M theory and see what it is. Now, Edward Witten, that brilliant physicist, he's the one that came up with the idea with M theory. How many people have heard of string theory? Okay, string theory, I'll just give a brief introduction to string theory because M theory takes string theory to its ultimate conclusion. String theory was this, that they realized that the particles, what they thought was particles and what they teach in university is particle physics, they aren't actually particles after all. These particles were made up of tiny strings that were so tiny that when billions of them got together, it looked like they formed a particle. And that these strings are fundamental. Okay, so this was called string theory. And the string theory again, it's formulated from mathematics on paper. But as they worked on the mathematical formulations, it turned out that there were 5 different string theories that were possible. Ed Witten proposed that the 5 different string theories we discussed earlier in the chapter was just a different way of looking at the same thing. So I say an appropriate analogy might be the story of the 5 blind men who latched onto 5 different parts of an elephant, and each one gave a different version of how they described the beast. You all know that. So these 5 different string theories were all contenders for the long hoped for grand unified theory of the universe that every physicist is trying to come up with to mark his name in history. But they found that all these different string theories were not in harmony with each other. They contradicted each other. It was another embarrassing situation for physicists. In hopes of a resolution, they began fixing the theories and projecting other theories because they believed in the mathematics. Each theory appeared equally valid, but did the equations give a true picture of reality? And Paul Davies, in his book, he writes that the equations that govern the full M theory have yet to be solved. They haven't even solved these equations yet. In spite of this murkiness, he assures us, M theory has generated tremendous enthusiasm. Talk about blind faith without any evidence, and they call themselves scientists. And then I comment, we know that Stephen Hawking is one of these enthusiastic fans because he has staked his entire reputation on a grand design scheme of the universe based on M theory.